Hello, Josh with Unicycle.com here. Today we are going to discuss proper press fit of crank arms. We get a lot of calls about having creaks in the hub area, or they think that's spokes or a bearing issue. Primarily this issue is the crank arms have bedded in and need to get a proper press fit. Traditionally, what you would need to do is you will have your hub and your crank sets already installed, and what you would need to order from us is a crank arm spacer packet. This comes with an assortment of spacers that will give you all that you need to re-establish that proper press fit. And then to be able to carry out the procedure, you will need a 2-in-1 crank arm puller. Of course, the pedal wrench combo tool, as this will work with the crank puller, and then also an 8mm Allen wrench. And then you will also need a tape measure. We preferably go with millimeters, since everything in the bicycle and unicycle industry is on the metric system. Okay, for instructional purposes only, we are going to have all the pieces apart, but if you suspect you have a creak and it's coming from the improper press fit or your crank arm has bedded in, the easy way to test this is go ahead and pull out your 8mm crank bolt, and you should be able to pull the crank arm off with your hand. Traditionally, if you have a proper press fit, you will need that crank arm extractor to pull the arm off. In this situation, 9 times out of 10, you can pull that crank arm off with your hand. Once you address that you have improper press fit of the crank arm, you need to measure the distance of the press fit. Take the spacers out of your off the axle, so all you have is the bearing and your crank arm. And then what we recommend is you physically just put your hand and press that crank arm on just enough that you can't pull the crank arm straight off. You would need to kind of wiggle the crank arm to be able to pull it off. Once you have done that, then you take your tape measure. This one has millimeters and inches. For this point, we're going to show you millimeters. And you want to measure that space that's in between the bearing and the physical crank arm where the edge is, the square edge is. This is showing here, it's roughly 14 millimeters. So then you take that spacer kit that we sent you, and you would add up the 14 millimeters minus 2 millimeters. The reason why you want to subtract 2 millimeters from the actual measurement is because what you want to drive that press fit home. And if you need to use quite a few spacers, that's quite all right, because as the crank arm beds in, you will continue to slowly reduce the number of spacers that you need on the crank arm. So we pressed this here, and it's roughly 2 millimeters. Now keep in mind, for instructional purposes only, we do not have the grease on the axle, but you do want a light coating of synthetic or white lithium grease. And then you would snug this down, snug the crank bolt down. If you have a torque wrench handy, you want to torque this to about 49 to 69 Newton meters. We thank you for watching. Now go out and ride.